Now we're going to finish up Chapter 2. We're going to first talk about the statistical problem. It's the four-step process for organizing a statistical problem. Number one, state. State what is the practical question in the context of the real-world setting. Plan. What specific statistical operations does this problem call for? Then solve. Make the graphs and carry out the calculations needed for the problem, and conclude. Give your practical conclusion in the setting of the real world. So what I'd like you to do is turn your books to page 57. We're going to do Apply Your Knowledge problem, logging in the rainforest. Conservationists have despaired over destruction of tropical rainforests by logging, clearing, and burning. That's the problem that we're working on. So when looking at this, the first thing we have to do, I want you guys to pause the recording and read the problem. Then we're going to do our four-step process. Now first, you have to state the problem, or what is the practical problem? How does logging affect tree count? So the next step is, what specific statistical operations does this problem call for? Well, we need to compare the distributions, including appropriate measures of center and spread for all the three different groups. Now, the next thing is make the graphs and carry out calculations needed for the problem. You can do stem plots, box plots, histograms. Let's say that we use stem plots. Then we can calculate X bar and S using Minitab and compare. Then it's time to make our conclusion. Now, the means in the stem plots appear to suggest that logging does reduce the number of trees per plot. And as we know, to plant a tree, the recovery is going to be kind of slow. So that would be our conclusion. So that's using the four-step process in solving a statistical problem. Now the last thing that we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to use box plots to compare three different things. So here's our problem. It's the tornado example, and we have this in our Minitab examples on Blackboard. The following data gives the number of tornadoes in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska for the years 1990 to 2004. What we're going to do is we're going to construct a box plot for all three of these states, but using the same scale. So we're going to learn how to use Minitab so that we have the same scale on the bottom and to compare distributions. And in this case, it's the number of tornadoes in these three states. We're going to describe the shape of the distributions. We're going to look at which state had the highest number of tornadoes in a year, and which one, what was the number of tornadoes unusual for that state. Which state tends to have the highest yearly number of tornadoes, and what measure of center and spread should be reported. These are the things we're going to look at. So here's our Minitab command file for doing a stacked box plot. It's going to end up looking like this, but what we're going to do is we're going to put these commands in Minitab. So we open up Minitab, we click into the sessions and enable our commands, and then I'm going to copy and paste these commands from there, and there's our plot. Now we're ready to answer the questions. Now the first one, Oklahoma, if it didn't have that outlier, one would say that it's somewhat symmetric, but with that outlier, it could either be skewed or that we have this data that looks somewhat normal with a, that is skewed, that has an outlier, on the right. Now Kansas looks like it could be somewhat left skewed. It's a possibility. It's very hard to tell on that one. But generally, if our median is further to the right, that means most of our data is to the right and it's tapering off to the left. So there's a good chance that that one's left skewed. And this one, because our median is to the left, it could be right skewed. So now it's time, which state has the highest number of tornadoes in a year? Well, this one does, Oklahoma. It's got over 140. That's a lot. So, but it is unusual because look, most of the data is over here. That's an outlier. It has the asterisk. Then it asks which state, part D was which state tends to have the highest yearly number of tornadoes. So which state tends to have the highest? Well, that's where we look at the median, and we would say Kansas tends to have the highest yearly number of tornadoes. So if we looked at this, seeing that Oklahoma has an outlier, we have Kansas and Nebraska that are left and right skewed. What measure of spread and center should we use? Probably our 5-number summary. Be a good idea. You'd get your median, and then you can get your interquartile range. So it's very nice to have this comparative box plot where we have the same scale for each of them, because it helps us to compare one distribution to the other. So it comes in very handy. Well, this is the end of Chapter 2, and we will start Chapter 3 next.